Roll call.
Parker. Here. Miscelinich.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Zittergruen. Chisel. Hadley.
Here.
Neal.
Here.
Is there anybody who wants to speak to the council about anything that's not on the agenda?
Thomas Hanson, 3469 Locust Road, Decorah. On the 1st of March 2018, State Senator, House Senate Majority Leader Bill Dix, a Republican, was videotaped down in a bar in Des Moines kissing somebody that was not his wife. The response to it from Republicans, including myself, from Democrats and the media, was immediate. And on the 12th of March 2018, Senator Bill Dix resigned his seat. It has been almost 2.5 months now since Councilman Steve Zittergruen was videotaped up in Chattahoochee Park doing something just as immoral but much more disgusting with somebody up there at the park. And there has been no response from Democrats. There has been no response from the city council. Now, if Mr. Zittergruen had been a private citizen, I wouldn't give a damn about what he did. But like Senator Dix, Mr. Zittergruen is an elected public official, and his private actions reflect on his public service. And if Mr. Zittergruen cannot take one of the most valued oaths that a man can take to his wife and family seriously, then how can we expect him to take his oath to the elected people, the people that had elected him and that he serves? Mr. Zittergruen needs to resign from this council. Thank you.
Consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the August 5th, 2024 council meeting and August 8th, 2024 council meeting. B, claims. C, resolution setting public hearing on designation of the expanded Central Business District urban renewal area and on urban renewal plan amendment. Resolution setting date for public hearing on designation of the Decorah East Side residential urban renewal area and on urban renewal plan and project. E, renewal Class C retail alcohol license, corner bar. F, renewal special Class C retail alcohol license, Coriana. G, renewal Class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service, Lorana Bistro. H, renewal Class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service, catering and living quarters, Rubaiyat. And I, renewal of special Class C retail alcohol license, Fairfield Marriott.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll second.
Motion made by Olson, consent seconded by Ms. Linich. Any further discussion? Hearing, seeing none. Roll call.
Olson.
Aye.
Miscelinich.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Chisel.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution approving service agreement with ISG for Dalen property planning. Can you give a background on that, please?
Yeah, so at the August, excuse me, at the August 5th council meeting, the council adopted resolution 3480, ranking ISG as the highest scoring respondent to the city's RFQ for the Dalen property planning and design services, and directed the city manager to negotiate a service agreement for council consideration at future meeting. The proposed resolution would authorize entering into the negotiated agreement for planning services for $33,000, and the proposed scope that was included in the response from ISG as part of the RFQ.
Motion to approve the service agreement with ISG for the Dalen property?
I'll second.
Motion made by Olson, seconded by Chisel. Any further discussion? Hearing saying none. Roll call?
Just for clarification, did Chisel was the second?
Second.
Okay,
Myself or Christopher, it doesn't matter.
Well,
that's
What
fine.
is
Just
that
want to make sure
line?
we get it in the minutes. Thank you.
okay. Roll call?
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Miscelinich,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution approving final plat of Briar Grove subdivision.
Okay, my apologies. Council's already discussed and considered this at the last meeting, but the action taken at the last meeting was a simple action item, and this does need to be approved by resolution. So it's again the same consideration, approving a plat that essentially creates a new property line up in the, a lot of us refer to as the Echo development up in the business park. So it creates essentially two parcels for, and two separate legal descriptions. The reason it's done as a plat, a final plat like this, is Iowa Code elaborates under section 354.6 that subdivision plat shall be made when a tract of land is subdivided by repeated divisions or simultaneous division into 3 or more parcels. And this has already been split one time, so this split would create 3 or more tracts. So that's why we're having to approve it as a final plat instead of a traditional plat of survey. So again, intent is simply to create new parcel boundary lines. There's no public improvements, public infrastructure associated with the rest of the site plan and plat. P&Z has recommended, or did not have a quorum present at the meeting this was to be considered. So by city code, 45 days after application is considered recommended approval by the commission.
I'd move for approval.
I'll second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Parker. Any further discussion? Hearing seen none. Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Yeah,
Cri-
that's all.
Christopher?
Olson. What did I skip? Sorry, it's one over here. Miscelinich.
Aye.
I was like, I'm missing one.
I was going to say, I think there's one that's missing. Okay. Consider ordinance amending section 2.22.030 of the Decorah Municipal Code regarding Board of Park Commission's powers and duties. First reading. Give the background on that, please.
Yes, so at the work session, excuse me, the work session for July, the council met as a joint work session with the park board and discussed this code section that talks about the powers and duties associated with them. The proposed ordinance drafted based on that conversation, which would limit the board's required recommendation for the sale, purchase, lease of city-owned land. Currently reads that it's for all property, and the proposed change would limit it to park-related city-owned land that they would provide recommendation before council could take action on. Also, the proposed ordinance would eliminate the requirement that Parks and Recreation operational expenses be approved by the board prior to payment, and refers all expenses and capital improvement expenditures to the city's adopted procurement policy.
I'd move for approval of the first reading.
Second.
Motion made by Chisel, second by Hadley. Any further discussion? Hearing seen none. Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miscelinich,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
I would make a motion to waive the second and third readings and adopt.
Second.
Okay, Motion made by Chisholm, seconded by Olson to waive the second and third and adopt. Discussion.
Yeah, I just, I don't know that we need to hurry on it, and I guess I always like to at least have the second reading so that people have been announced and then can have some time to respond. Not that I think that it will be, but as practice, I always like to at least have the second reading.
I do too, but this one here is just so black and white and simple. It's not really controversial. The only people it really affects are the Park Rec Commission and employees. I mean, it doesn't impact the community as a whole in anything other than simplifying how things get done.
I totally agree. I guess my concern on this one is just that I think the only article in the paper that's been about it was that we were thinking about whether or not we were going to allow Park Rec to be elected or not. And so this at least gives people the chance to be like, oh, that's not what this is. Great. I worry that if we pass this, there's going to be people jumping to conclusions that like, oh my gosh, and now it's not going to be elected. I just want to.
No, that's up to the media then to be truthful in how they get it out.
No, it's not that they're not truthful. I just want, I don't want to be perceived as rushing something through when the only news that has been out there has been us thinking about these things. So that's the only reason I'm saying we should maybe go to the second reading. As I said, there isn't anything, but I just want to not give the appearance of rushing something through.
Any other further discussion? Roll call?
Chisholm,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
No.
Parker,
Aye.
Miscelinich.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Actually,
Just
Actually,
question,
Mayor,
sorry.
it
I
does
don't-
fail. It needs 6 out of 7 supermajority to waive second.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
So I was afraid of.
sorry about that. Thank you. Okay. Consider C3 design application, Vesterheim 418 West Water Street. Can I get background on that, please?
Yes, so the city's received an application from Vesterheim for the property at 418 West Water Street, the former Montessori school that they've recently acquired. Exterior work would be on the lower level at the rear of the building. City Code 1504-40 states that historic preservation will review the C3 plan design application, provide an advisory recommendation to P&Z. That has been included in Dropbox. P&Z shall review the application for conformity with those regulations within Chapter 1504 and either approve or disapprove and submit to council. That chapter is also in Dropbox. C3 plan design application for Vesterheim includes, again, lower level work at the rear of the building with modifying 2 existing openings in the lower rear wall, including the replacement of an overhead door and an entry door and the canopy structures over both of them. Proposal also indicates a desire to eliminate excess electrical and HVAC wiring that may no longer be needed after they relocate HVAC as part of the project. Also noted was the possibility of replacing existing vinyl sign with something more appropriate and historically accurate material, and also repainting, but no color patterns or anything has been shown, and that's not part of this application. I want to make that clear. Historic Preservation Commission has voted to endorse the proposed project, and P&Z recommends approval.
Hadley will move approval.
Second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Neal. Discussion? You have any questions? Chris from Johnson's from Vesterheim is here. Considering none. Roll call.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miscelinich,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisholm.
Discussion on downtown overnight parking program.
Okay, so staff's prepared a preliminary response to council's request for analyzing parking within the downtown and needs and potential impacts from future upper story residential restoration or creation projects. I believe, John, do you have any print material to distribute or just Okay, want to discuss the findings then, what we've reviewed to date. Jeremy left a dossier of about 285 pages of material that was used to, that he was going to use as part of this discussion. Staff has also put together, excuse me, put together through our rental inspection and registration program, identified all the addresses within the C3 district, especially focusing on Water Street and the immediately adjacent cross streets, the number of both short-term rentals as well as long-term rentals within those buildings, and then identified also within that same area, the C3 district, the number of overnight parking stalls that are currently allowed within the district. At this point, we have identified 55 units for either, again, short-term rental, long-term rental, and 92 overnight parking stalls that are available currently. We also took a look at the distribution, because maybe that's the issue, right? That, maybe there's more residential units located to the west that we don't have a lot of overnight parking available in that area, which is correct. Most of the public overnight parking, those 92 stalls we've talked about, are located along Hively on the north side of North Alley, and then kind of wrap around on the east side and then come back to the south along Broadway and some on Main. Excuse me. But what we found is when we analyzed these, that many on the west end, most on the west end, actually provide their own off-street parking. And also, we were recently made aware that there is a private venture of a surface parking lot that should provide 12 additional parking stalls, roughly, at $100 per month or $1,000 per year. Again, that's more focused on the west end, south of Water Street.
So do those 92 available parking stalls, does that include like spaces that they have behind their buildings and things like that, or is that just the public parking areas?
Combination of public and private.
Okay, so it includes it all.
The 92 is just ours? Oh,
Okay, they're
my
just public
apologies.
ones, okay.
And do we have any idea of, are those spaces filled, those 92 filled? Are people aware of them so they know to put their cars
No.
there? Is it just that our problem isn't that we don't have the spots? The problem is we just don't have the education that the spots are available?
A lot of those are going underutilized, especially on Broadway. That's the biggest stretch that overnight parking is allowed, but we're not seeing, especially on the south side. The north side does see decent use for overnight parking, but the vast majority of the south side of Broadway does not see overnight parking. That question was posed to police officers, to street department on their observations, whether it's snow removal or just with the police department, of course, regular patrol. Thank you.
Could we, you know how when we do a street project and we communicate with the people within the street, that we're doing a street project and this is what we have? I'm wondering, could we do a similar scenario? And I'm mainly interested in the people who are actually living, not short-term rentals, but long-term rentals downtown. Could we do some kind of communication with them specifically, or the people who, obviously we don't know the renters, but we know the people who own the building, and get some kind of survey and information out to those people directly so we actually could have a conversation along with those and their needs and make sure this meets their needs and that they know that this is available?
So I heard survey there, and that triggered something for me. That so as part of that 285-page dossier that Jeremy had assembled, it included the results of a survey from Downtown Betterment, I believe, conducted on parking within the C3 district. And overwhelmingly, the responses throughout it are all oriented towards customer parking. There is very little mention of any kind of long-term or residential short-term parking. Some of the responses were even as drastic as identifying parking further away from the downtown district and looking at shuttle buses and ways to get people from like, out of area parking into downtown. So,
And that was in reference to like customers?
correct.
Busing them
The
in?
responses to those surveys were very heavy on customer parking.
Okay.
The concern being for any stall that you identify as allowed overnight parking, that you will see sustained overnight parking, and not just overnight, but throughout the day parking as well.
But what I'm hearing from you is we have these spots and nobody's in them.
Correct.
So I guess so maybe survey is the wrong word. Maybe it's just a newsletter. Like, hey, if you live downtown, so you know this is where you can park overnight. Maybe it's just that we need a newsletter like we have with, hey, we're going to rip up your street, FYI.
I think there's certainly a need for education and some visualization of where these parking spots are. But it would also be beneficial, I believe, for the council to see where the residents live and where the parking spots are. Because, you know, if you're carrying groceries and you live on Water Street, it's a challenge it's a challenge, right? Unless you pull into the pull off or the designated loading areas on Water Street just to drop your stuff off if you're doing laundry or if you're unloading groceries and things like that. So while I really appreciate the work of staff and things like that, before we move forward with a newsletter or a communication, I'd like to make sure that, or especially before we offer a permit style anything, if we move that direction at all, I think the parking spaces need to be realistically within 2.5 blocks of where people are living. Because if not, you're better off just walking to Fairway or the co-op and not even using your car. And while that's great for our sustainability roles, it's not always feasible.
In this study, was there any consideration as far as reconfiguring the parking spots that are in the North Alley to enhance or change or?
So we did identify some areas within North Alley that are probably, if council wanted to pursue some kind of permitted overnight parking, dedicated parking stalls, there's a segment in the middle, essentially, that we would recommend. I say in the middle, it's all on the south edge, but not on the west end towards Mabes, and not even on the far east end where you've got Farmers Market that does set up. But also the Woolen Mill has some dedicated parking stalls there as well. The one challenge we have with that particular area, and I know it was brought up in the last meeting, that even if this is a permitted parking, is snow removal. That's actually where we end up storing most of our snow in an interim, is this area, because it's not well utilized as parking areas in the winter months. So that's where we end up typically storing it until we can get it out of there.
I assume you're referencing like what would be behind Copyland, on the north side of Copyland there?
That'd be about right,
About
yeah.
the end of the 200 block there, Westwater.
Yep.
Is there anything, like, for if people that are staying at Hotel Winnebago and they go in and they get their pass and they put it in their car and they just park it in that parking lot, is there a certain place that is designated for them that they're supposed to be parking? Or can they just park back there in the parking lot?
They could just park back there in the middle rows. So, important to note that Dayspring Lane is still considered a street, so several might not know that. I can actually speak from when I interviewed for council. The Hotel Wynn called and told me I had to move my truck. I was parked on the street, and I said, no, I'm parked out back. And they're like, technically that's a street. So that parallel portion, you can't park there overnight as part of the Hotel Wynn. You have to park in the middle angle rows there.
Yeah.
But as far as that, throughout that stretch.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and also speaking to, and I think it's a good idea to possibly reach out to some people that are living up there and get some input from them. Because I think some of the frustration that I've heard is that, you know, I think we overthink it for residents, And then when it comes to Hotel Winneshiek, it's like, here's your pass, you park that, you know, just park there. And I think, you know, outside of the snow removal, you know, it'd be the similar as what we do with Hotel Winneshiek with the snow removal. Or if it's a snow emergency, obviously they can't park there because it's a snow emergency. So I'm thinking, you know, I'd like to go forward to possibly reaching out to some residents that are down there, seeing if they have anything that they want to say or, you know, have any ideas. And also just to kind of maybe just talk to the council about not overthinking this and being just pretty as simple as, you know, just being able to get a permit. As if you have it there, you're not going to get a ticket between 2 to 6 and non-snow emergency times, you know, and not necessarily, you know, kind of going down a rabbit hole as far as like you park here or this or that. I just think we could overthink it, and I don't necessarily think it's a good idea. That's my opinion.
Are we talking about permits like that we would charge a fee for? Have a permit to park? Is that what?
If that were to be the
Thinking?
case, I do think the only real feasible location to do that is North Alley.
Right.
Like, if you're looking at that.
Right.
Even at the staff level, we've talked about, okay, what potential side streets, back streets would be more suitable for overnight parking.
What about those side angle parking by Fairway?
That's one of the areas we've identified, actually. I
Can,
don't think that's gonna achieve necessarily the need or outcome, because again, most of that public available parking is kind of focused on that east end
Yep.
and wraps around. But that is a section we've identified, we'd open it up there. The real difficulty as you go west, especially on the streets south of Water, is it gets pretty tight. So if you start even with one-sided parking, it gets pretty tight through there.
could, no, sorry,
No, you're good.
I was just gonna make a suggestion. What if we put this on a work agenda, on a council agenda, and we invited actually renters from the downtown to come to that work session? And then prior to that work session, we could have maybe a map of where our overnight parking is and where we know those 55 apartments of long-term are. I mean, I like Ross's idea. I think a visual would say a lot to us. And then we
Yep.
could just have an open call to people to come and talk to council.
And start a pilot project now before it snows,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Just, we've got a couple months here. We could start a pilot project, not drag our feet, get response of downtown dwellers and then scope it out further for the rest of the town as we move forward. But, you know, we could move forward quickly with a block of parking spaces like you talked about, Travis.
I've got a question. Is there enough parking spots to have no parking along Hively? Are there enough free parking spots that the people who are parking along Hively could be parking in that north alley?
So anecdotally, we're not seeing as much on-street parking on, if you're talking the far east end of Hively.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not seeing as much as we used to see there.
Well, I think Dave had taken and made it so there were less parking spots along there.
We did.
And that might be the case. That would have been prior to my arrival.
Yeah.
And I can speak to, even since my arrival, we're seeing fewer and fewer cars park in that stretch of Hively. But that is one of the areas that overnight parking is permissible for upper story residential, but North Alley is not. So that's
Gotcha.
always been our solution.
Okay,
Is that they
gotcha.
can park on Hively, but they can't park in North Alley.
And just to kind of add to that, I've heard a lot of complaints about it's pretty treacherous on Hively Street.
Yeah.
I mean, parking your car there, loading kids into it, and especially like in the morning, when there's a lot of debate whether or not that should even be a two-way. So, you know, and
Well, during the discussion, like what you suggested, I'd like to have that included, because if you're giving people who have apartments up above, and just say all they need is a permit, just like they do at Hotel Winneshiek, then we could say no more parking along Hively. I've always found that to be pretty treacherous, and think that they should be able to park in the North Alley part, but
And I mean, this is down the road, but
Yeah,
as
I
a
know.
reminder to council, the street improvement plan was roughly Hively reconstruction next year from College Drive to the intersection out front
Right.
here. And then Hively from that intersection west to State in conjunction with the school when they, figure out what they're doing on that site. Then we could coordinate that stretch of Hively to be redone as well. We
Okay.
could take some of these discussions and considerations at that time as well. Again, that's way down the road, but just something to keep in mind as well.
Okay, can you put that on a work session?
Can,
Probably not.
so next work session,
No,
as in
probably
next
not.
week is,
Right,
public safety and municipal building.
okay.
And if you want to tack it on there, we could. Otherwise, September doesn't have one slated, but as,
And since, I was just gonna say, since you don't have street committee anymore, and I'm not gonna be on the board, not gonna be with you anymore, you should approve the street plan before Thanksgiving. And so have a work session before Halloween on your slate for next year to look at. So it ties in well with that. So it could just be a streets discussion.
In September.
so, and this is what I was going to preface. So in September, there's not one currently planned. However, as part of my employment contract, I'm required to maintain my credentialed manager status.
Okay.
And so I'll be at a conference that week and won't be available for that work session. So while I'm certainly confident John and Carrie and staff can lead that conversation with council, just know that I won't be present at that September one. if you
I
wanna
think
do it then.
I prefer not having it on the next one, which is Monday. Just because you get too much on, it's very hard to have adequate discussion for all
Agreed.
the items.
I'm comfortable with it in September and a discussion on street plan with John and,
Yeah, I
John.
think that'd be good,
Yeah.
especially if you want to beat
John and
the
Mike
winter,
and Carrie.
the winter timeframe. I think that's a good idea to get it on as soon as possible, so, yeah.
Okay. Discussion on noise ordinance. I see you've got some examples in the Dropbox.
Yes, so there's 3 examples included in Dropbox, and while these are all slightly larger communities, each one has a different approach to it, and so very strategic on the 3 included. So one of the examples includes, what we talked about with being time and place. So during specific times of the day, these are the types of activities that are prohibited. That's one example. That's one route we could go. Another example is all purely decibel level, that any activity that results in a decibel level above X is prohibited. However, the third example I gave in there is a combination of the two. This would be much more involved, but it is a combination of the two where it's got a time and activity is what I should call it, time and activity component to it. It talks about not only the window that you are allowed to do these activities, but also include a duration limit. So you might be allowed to have decibel levels exceeding 80 decibels between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. while working on cars. However, that duration might be limited to 30 minutes. I'm using that as an example, but that's
And those decibels are really high. I mean, in the Des Moines plan, the decibels of which they're talking about, that they're limited, are very high decibels. So, personally, I like the combo.
right, and that's really what I'd like council to dial in on as part of this discussion is which one of those 3 paths do you see Decorah taking?
Which one is the combo?
Combo's Des Moines.
Just out of curiosity, have we had issues and also issues enforcing noise with our current ordinance? Is that what brought this up, just out of curiosity?
So there's two issues that have been brought up in the past. One, you've all heard me say the same thing as the racetrack, and I know this is not what this discussion's about, so I don't even really want to go down that path. But I do want to point out that is something that I actually did receive an email wanting me to make sure council's aware that that's considered as part of this noise ordinance. And I responded, that's not our discussion. But the other one that we do hear routinely, and it's not necessarily the same property, I want to say there's two properties in particular, are either air conditioner condensers or chiller refrigerator condensers. We do hear that routinely on the west side with that one. So those are the main concerns that get brought up.
We've also had complaints on what time construction starts. We'll get phone calls on that.
And barking dogs.
I've also had complaints about the trash being picked up as well at 4 in the morning.
You've heard those.
I heard those.
I want to reiterate, because I did bring this up. This has absolutely nothing to do with the races. We've been very clear that the races, first of all, are county property, but also that we have worked well with the racetracks. This has never been about the races. I actually did bring it up because of the HVAC systems that have caused, and their large decibels that residents are complaining about. So in a noise ordinance, that's actually what I'm most interested in seeing as well, in order, as we limit our setbacks, right, and we condense housing in the bowl. I think we have to have a policy in place that says then, you know, with your air conditioner, you need to put up some sound walls if they're on the outside of your house and you're right next to somebody else.
And I think the best way for the city to kind of be able to address that, because enforcement's something you need to consider
Yep.
as part of any ordinance, is going to be, we're going to have to measure decibels at the property line. That's the only way I see a potential enforcement mechanism for something like that, or the chillers, commercial chillers, is going to be a decibel level at the property line. Whether the person that would be in violation installs sound barriers, or they get a more efficient condenser that's quieter, that'd be up to them. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but that's probably the most likely to be successful from an enforcement standpoint, is just decibel level at the property line. However you meet that requirement, that's on you.
And I do know in one specific example, a house had an option of where they put their air conditioner, and were asked by their neighbor not to put it next to them, and they still put the compressor there, and they could have put it behind, right? So an ordinance like this would encourage homeowners, when they're replacing units or when they're replacing things, that it makes the most sense to think about your neighbors in doing so. So that's why I put this on the agenda. It's come up for 2 years.
I guess since the idea of enforcement is going to basically fall on the police department to enforce that, I'd like to hear from Chief Thine. I hate to put her on the spot, but I'd appreciate to hear from her what would be the easiest way to try to enforce some of this stuff. Just seems like a decibel thing would be a hard thing to.
Yeah, for us, obviously with the decibels, most of the time when it's a neighbor dispute, loud music, things of that nature that's unreasonable, they know that we're coming. And so when we get there, I'm not going to be able to get a good decibel reading on something like that. That becomes the issue for us, taking somebody's word for it that we can't prove or verify occurred. So time and place and just reasonableness always seems to be the best for me, because I think that it's going to be an interesting dilemma for us to go to a property and get in on private property to test decibel sounds of somebody's air conditioner. I think that's going to be an issue for police.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Yeah, and just reading through them, that was my initial thought as well, that time and place is pretty concrete and set in stone, with certain exceptions allowed for certain things like fire alarms and things like that that are going to be going off, that made most sense to me rather than a decibel thing.
I think,
So what I might add, John and I were just talking that if the focus is, so let's say we're like, you know what, I believe Councilmember Parker brought up, what this is trying to address that we're having issues with. If it is something as simple as AC units that we want to focus on, we can even just put in code that an air conditioner condenser unit needs to be installed in the rear property as opposed to the side yard.
So then you put it on Board of Adjustment to handle problems when they need to put it the other way. I don't agree with this. I think that so many things in this world are not subjective. And I understand that enforcement would be difficult without to me, it would seem that enforcement would be difficult without something not subjective. Because if not, then it's just a nuisance complaint. And, reoccurrent complaints based on something that is loud, and whether loud is loud to you or whether it's loud to me is subjective. If you look at the guidance from OSHA, for example, on sound protection and things like that, it's not subjective. It's decibel based. It's safety things. So, a nuisance should be able to be defined non-subjectively as well. So I support Emily's concept and your example of the mixed use.
I do think with decibel checks on HVAC systems, we're not talking about the decibel at the residence of where it is. We're actually talking about the decibel level at the residence that has a complaint, right? So I think we would be invited and probably welcomed to come in with a decibel reader and read the decibels of what they're hearing with their windows closed in a house. And there's one, and this person has it on their iPhone, right? They can sit there with their iPhone with their windows closed in their house and hear the air conditioner from their neighbors, and it's loud. So this would be an invited. I do think that there are time and place, right? Obviously, people rev their motors downtown, and it's annoying, and we can have a code for it, and there's no way to track that person down. But I think some things we certainly can, and which is why I'm for this mixed idea. Things like the nuisance, people mowing their lawn, early in the morning, or someone operating something for 5 hours straight. I think we can address those things, and we do get complaints every now and then about all of those.
Well, and if we do have a loud car, we can ask them to accelerate. I believe we could ask them to accelerate and see what their muffler is putting out. If it's you're going to know it's not a normal muffler, right? I don't think we have to say glass packs or straight pipes or whatever, but having a decibel based something so people can just be like, oh, well, Decorah is going to crack down on noise would help.
Any suggestions as far as?
Well, of the council members that have spoke, I'm leaning towards a combination of the two, something that's obviously a more Decorah appropriate version of what Des Moines has, that combines the time and activity as well as duration. Unless I hear other council member feedback, work with John to prepare something that's more appropriate.
Yeah, I have no problem with a combo.
Yeah, I guess I would, me personally, like to see a more, like you said, Decorah appropriate document before I'd have any feedback of, I'd like to see it first, in our own document before moving forward. Anything.
Okay, discussion on downtown economic development grant program. Travis.
Okay, so again, this was prepared and meant to be a starting point for discussion with council. This was established as a goal during the goal setting session, and the catalyst for this coming at this point in time is the urban renewal plan for the expanded C3 district that we set the public hearing for earlier in the consent agenda. That is a potential funding mechanism for such a program. That plan has in it you have to identify the uses of TIF within that urban renewal plan. And we did put in there downtown economic development grant incentives. So that's kind of the catalyst of why now. As it's prepared, the draft program has two types, and please cut this up however you want. Again, this was meant to be a starting point for discussion. But it has two types of eligible projects, one being exterior work, which would focus on windows, doors, brickwork, roofs, things of that nature, and have a cap of $10,000, where the city would provide reimbursement of up to a third of the documented project costs. The second type of eligible project would be a creation or restoration of upper story residential units and have a cap of $25,000, where again the city would reimburse up to a third of the documented project costs. Two goals that I believe that were wanted to be achieved by council through that goal setting discussion. The thought of both projects having a reimbursement of a third of the cost would be that owner equity could be 1/3, and then the remaining third, potentially the Chamber of Commerce revolving loan fund. So you got kind of a three-legged stool to a project. That is also why in the draft project document it states that a review committee consists of the Chamber of Commerce revolving loan fund committee. Because if they're already reviewing this for their own consideration, they then could make a recommendation to council that ultimately council approves the award. Program, the way it's drafted, the program would be funded on an annual basis, so it would be provided a budget every year. And so let's say, for example, the budget's only $25,000 and there's 2 grant applications received for $25,000 each for upper story residential. It would be up to that grant committee to evaluate the 2 applications and make a recommendation to council of, let's say one is a astronomical project and the other one, no dice. Here's a recommendation, fund this one full, no to this one. Or if they're both even keel, that grant committee could recommend award, split the difference, $12,500 for each one. So that's how it would work, is council would say, here's the amount that we are creating the pool for on an annual basis. And then the grant applications would all be received and evaluated one time a year. Divvy out the funds that were budgeted for that fiscal year. Again, this could be financed through the future TIF revenues in the C3 Urban Renewal Area Amendment. However, that is going to take time to build that balance up. And so another potential funding is the city council's, I believe we've turned it the discretionary hotel motel tax revenues that was used to fund Chamber of Commerce, Wenatchee County Development and Tourism, other nonprofit requests that still had a remaining balance for this fiscal year of about $20,000. So that could also be used as revenues for this project.
This is awesome, and I feel like when we set aside hotel motel funds and we said we want to apply that money to helping the downtown district, I feel like this program does exactly what we set that aside for. So I am 100% for this program. Thank you.
And FYI, Chamber just met last Friday, and they are fully on board with this too. They're excited to get
Yep.
involved with this, so.
So you were looking for this general ideas.
I thought this was, yeah, it's termed as just discussion, because I
Okay,
didn't think,
that's
this is
right.
not quite ready for adoption, but
No.
am I going down the right path here?
Great, Pat.
It's a beautiful thing, Travis. If you don't use it for your management class, hopefully you can use it next year for something when you, for the League of Cities, when we kick it off, and you can pitch the good news that Decorah is doing something to support their C3 tax base.
No, this has come up a couple times before, and I think everybody's pretty much on board that this is a really good idea to help some small businesses out in Decorah.
Christopher, what do you think?
I agree. Majority of my ward is downtown, and I feel like this would be a benefit to a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final outcomes.
Randy?
Not really. I hate giving money away. If it was a revolving loan fund like what the Chamber's doing at a very low interest rate, that'd be much more appealing.
Didn't you just say that some of the guidelines would be according to their revolving loan fund?
It would be based on their score, assuming they're an applicant. But I believe what Randy's
But
getting
that
at.
would be,
Return on any of this money.
I think one of the advantages, I mean, we're applying this to our downtown district, and you can go to any small town in Iowa, right? And you can see what the state of their downtowns are, right? And the ones where they have preserved this historic facing downtown with these old buildings that require a lots of infusion of money to repair them, are thriving. And communities have had to let their buildings go or aren't able to support them. And I think the downtown historic district benefits the entire town of Decorah. We all do better when our downtown is thriving. And the buildings are expensive to maintain. I think many of the people who are applying for this grant will be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on their building already. They're already going to pay loans to the bank, loans to hotel motel. And to me, this is an investment by the city to say that downtown matters to all of us. And that's why I think it's really important that we have this grant program.
Brent?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for sure.
Is everyone on board with kind of the two different eligible projects and the, even if the thresholds aren't quite right, but at least the discrepancy between the two further incentivize the upper story residential as opposed to the exterior facade roof work?
Yes.
Okay, general acceptance?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, we'll wait to hear more.
I'll polish it up and maybe even have an application to like show some of the attachments as part of the program and stuff as well. Get with John with any legal disclaimers, because the draft project does say that there will be an agreement between the city and the applicant on terms and conditions. So I'll work with John on what that might look like.
Okay. We have one opening on Decorah Human Rights Commission. I think that's the only opening that we have so far. City manager and department heads, Travis?
3 items quickly. Well, we already talked about the reminder of the work session next week, Monday night, 5:45, on public safety update and building financing options. I did receive an email from ISG that assuming a contract was awarded today and knowing the timeline, how we want a pretty quick timeline, they wanted to have a stakeholder kickoff meeting next week on Monday. And again, stakeholders would be council members, park board members, and basically those heavily involved with the project out there. So please get back to me on if you would have a, excuse me, I apologize. I promise I'm over what I had at the last meeting.
Coulda
I
fooled me.
cannot get rid of this cough. I just cannot get rid of it. But I've asked, if we can do late afternoon, that we can time it, that it is. I know school's back in session and that, that might be a little harder to manage, but maybe even if it's a 4:45, 5 o'clock, they've talked about just a virtual kickoff meeting that we could hold prior to that work session. So please get back to me on what availability you might have next week on Monday. And also, I wanted to point out, I'm sure many of you have seen the SMID parklets are now in place downtown on Water Street. And it may have come a bit like a IKEA furniture, but staff did a great job of getting them assembled. And, after the first one was done, I think, what was that final assembly time on the second one? Right around an hour.
Where are the two located? You have two.
The city received 4 applications on this project, are on this program, and the two selected were Sugar Bowl and Blazing Star. So those are both in front of both of those establishments. Again, these are public parklets available for everyone's use. Part of this program is the two businesses that applied, they enter into a maintenance agreement says that they will help keep them clean and make the city aware if there's any, any breaks or any issues with them. So they are public use. You can grab a Mabes Pizza and sit in one, an Impact Coffee, sit in one. It's not limited to just those two businesses.
Do you have PR going out on that fact?
We
'Cause
will
I was-
now.
I was gonna say, because I immediately thought it was for the restaurant, so.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
that'd be a good idea to put it out.
Yep. I'll work with local media and we'll push that out.
Okay.
You know,
That's all I had.
You know how to get a hold of us?
We've been in touch.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I have. Anything, you guys? Carrie?
Carrie?
No, nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Brent?
I don't believe so. Nothing tonight.
Christopher?
Nothing tonight.
Kirsten?
A couple quick things. We did have the chamber board meeting on Friday. They went over some of their revenues they got. The golf outing went really well back in June. They raised about almost $9,000 from that, so that went really well. And the only other thing I had as a reference to that was my wife and I did go down to the state fair last Monday and worked for the Northeast Iowa tourism booth that they had down there. It happened to rain that day, so that pushed everybody inside, so we had a lot of people come visit our booth. Majority of the people probably that I talked to were within 30, 40 miles probably of Des Moines. So I think the chamber's gonna evaluate whether that's worth our dollar to go down that far away and maybe look at going somewhere else maybe in the future or something like that. But it was well attended, and a lot of people are really looking forward to coming up to Decorah, so.
Randy?
The only thing I got is a reminder, school opens on Friday, so watch out for little ones and beginning drivers on the street that are anxious to get to school and show off their new cars.
Emily?
I got a couple things, Mayor. One, there's a sustainability meeting on Wednesday that I can't attend because I have Meet the Teacher Night on Wednesday. So if anybody is able to attend the sustainability meeting, that is now at the public library. Their meetings will be there. I would appreciate it if anybody could go to that. Another is I do want to just ask my colleagues once again if anyone who voted, I think it's if you voted no for the appointment, wanted to bring it up. I do think from September to December is a long time to go without a sitting council member. I think it becomes difficult to make decisions. So I would just plead on that. And then as a publicly elected official, I do think it's important that I address some of the remarks that have been made at our meeting, the last two meetings, with a couple thoughts of my own. The most important being is that I don't believe that it is an appropriate use of public space to attack a public official for anything related to their own personal endeavors. No laws have been broken, and any type of oath or anything a council member has within their own personal life is honestly no business of ours. And so I don't want to continue to entertain that thought. I also think we live in a very awkward time of what is morality when we have a person running for president who has actually been convicted of rape, convicted of sex with a porn star, convicted of, or at least on tape, propouting how he has groped women. And so I hope that we no longer have to entertain attacks on council people and their personal lives and their personal decisions in which no laws were broken. We are not the judge and jury of others. What they choose to do in their own personal time is between themselves, their families, between themselves, their gods. And it is not on us to impose our own morality on that. We are here to uphold the laws of Iowa and of the United States. And I do think that as council people, that is our role. right? That our ethics are grounded in law, in what we all have determined is collective morality. I don't like confrontation. This is hard for me to say. I just cannot sit idly by and watch a fellow council member who I feel has made great contribution to our city, who is a valued member of this council, who comes with hard questions, who asks hard questions, and has worked very hard on behalf of the city. I do not appreciate him being torn down in such a manner. So I just wanted to make that comment publicly.
Ross?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I also wanted to say, Ross, where are you? We don't even get to go out and have, you know, something at T-Box. So thank you for your service, Ross.
You bet. Just thank you for the opportunity to serve. There is, in that dossier of public parking, there's lots of good history. It was SMID and betterment things. So the whole North Alley, Hively, school, I'm going to be sad to miss that one. Super fun. You guys have great opportunities going forward, and best of luck to all of you. Decorah is beautiful. It will always be my home, and I look forward to having a beer with you next time I'm back.
Mayor, can I say
Sure.
I apologize. I'm going to come back to me. I completely forgot this was his last council meeting with us. So, Ross, just wanted to say thank you for your service. As a past city employee, I always appreciated your questions and your willingness to engage with city employees. The only council member that ever rode around with me while I was on duty, so I appreciate that. And then also as a city council member, I always appreciated your continued efforts and then working with us and discussions afterwards and coming to fly tying nights and having beers afterwards. So it's always been appreciated. So thank you for your service, and I appreciate everything you've done.
Anything else?
Yes, since Ms. Neal broke the rules on public.
He is not allowed to comment right now, Mayor.
You're not allowed to comment at this time.
Not allowed to comment on public.
Yes, I am. I may in my own personal time. Yes, I may. And I did not comment to you directly. I
Okay,
commented.
we're not going to have a discussion between the two of you. Move to adjourn?